question, John. Would you mind telling how old were you when you first started training with a knife?
Around 20 years old.
What actually motivated you to start training with it?
Well, I had to. Where I was at was pretty dangerous place to be. So if you didn't have training, you could get killed pretty easy.
I know that you have your own system. Can you tell about it?
Yeah, it's really a very, very simple knife system. Based on attack as defense. So primarily our method is to attack the opponent as opposed to defend against their attack. And it requires, a very good foundation in weapon handling skill. However, the application of it isn't sophisticated at all.
Is there any logical model of your system?
Really, it's foundational based on Wing Chun and Filipino martial arts. The very simple approach is, number one, you don't let the opponent dictate the combat. Mm-hmm. You're going to dictate that yourself. So we try to force the opponent into making a decision, and then attack based on their lack of skill or skill. So it's very simple. In the beginning, it's very simple, and progressively it gets more and more aggressive.
Do you have a certain methodology of preparation? How does it look like, and what do you start teaching on the first stage?
Yeah, it's very simple. Of course you have to have a base set of skills. And so, can I bring in my partner?
Okay.
So, Joe, let's just say, I don't know if you can see us well. Right now, we're probably really too close together for comfort, right? This is Joe. He's been my student 4 years or 3 years. But if he has a weapon and I have a weapon, my first order of business is to practice moving, so that when he attacks, I move. Okay, and everybody uses a numbering system, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Who cares about that? Nobody who attacks you with a knife is going to use that. So even though you can use that, we don't care about the numbering system. But what I care is wherever he attacks me from, I want not to be at that point. Secondarily, I want my blade against his flesh. Mm-hmm. I don't want to try to scoop it. I don't want to try to catch it. I don't want to try to pass it. I don't want to make contact with him unless it's my blade on his skin. Now, typically, if I strike this, his hand will retract and I'll cut his throat. So we want to be very direct in the application. And so if he fakes a motion at me, I just cut him directly. But in the basic foundation, if he cuts my neck, I impede the progress of his blade. I don't cut his hand because his hand may continue. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I impede it and I dig into it. But it's really important in the foundation. When I do this, that I'm out of the arc. Okay, and I want to account for, if he takes a big step at me, I want to account for his body too. Because he may be a big, strong guy. If I do this technique, he may still control me. So I want to make sure that he can't do that. So that's the quickest thing I do. And yes, we will do it by the numbers, and I'm sure you've interviewed other knife instructors. They'll do angle 1, angle 2, angle 3, angle 4, angle 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's all horseshit, really, if you ask me, because nobody's going to go 5, 6, 7 when they try to kill you. They'll have a knife, and they want to put it inside your body. That's their goal. My goal is to keep my body out of the way of the knife and put my knife in their body with as little risk to myself as possible. So a lot of time when I practice it, I'll use a soft dagger, okay? Because the hard dagger, if I do this, when he attacks me, if I do that with this, he won't swing again. The training will be over. So we use these soft daggers so we can really make impact. And this will teach me both, if I'm attacking him, can you grab a soft dagger? This is really a common error in all knife systems. If I'm using a metal blade, sharp or not, if I hit him in the face, it's going to knock his teeth out. If I hit his ribs, it's going to break a rib. So when I'm testing him and I attack him, a lot of times I have a habit of not really trying to hit him with it. Now don't move, Joel. When I go like this, I'll cut his face. I really am going to cut him. So he knows. Now when he moves, he has to, I do it to you, he has to move or he gets hit. So that's the very, very most basic thing that we practice. We call it cut and stick. So I cut his hand and turn this way, Joe. When I hit his hand, see, I don't want to cut through it. I want to hit it and I want to bite into it, if you can see that, okay? When his hand retracts, that's when I'll follow it. Now some people will do the same thing. I've seen people steal my knife stuff and put it on video. They go like this. That's a waste of motion. When I pull this knife back, he will already stab me with his other knife. Because I assume he has two. He's got two hands. He must have two weapons, right? And if he doesn't, he's still got a fist there he can punch me with. Okay? God gave you an instinct. If I cut this hand, he will hit me with the other one. I assume that. So when I go like that, see, I'm out of the way of that. If he comes back, now you will see the same techniques that you see all my wonderful peers doing, which is all that. But that is worthless if the first part isn't present. And you told me you interviewed Ron Balicki and a few of my peers. We have the same instructors, okay? But there's a difference in the way I teach. Because I don't do this, do probably sit. And let him take the knife. No. I'm going to cut him and then stab him. So he has to, right, cause me some damage or I'm not going to stop. Another thing is a lot of times a real knife attack is not so much with the knife but the body. So can you move this way so they can see? So if I'm going to attack him with a knife, I'm going to walk up, look at him, and then stab him. I'm not going to go. You see, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to do that. So my thing is, why would I train to defend someone who does this? Because I live in a dangerous neighborhood in Texas. I've never seen anybody do this. Never. They are a person who has a weapon and wants to kill you. They're not a knife fighter. And I think that's where a lot of people who do knife fighting, they make a big mistake. They assume their opponent will respond in a pre-programmed fashion. It's dangerous to train that way. So whether he thrusts, here I will still impede his progress. But you notice the first thing I do, I move out of the way of the blade. When I move out of the blade, I let him impact it when he pulls it away. Now, if he attacks again, I move back, I put the weapon in his body, and then take the weapon out. I don't try to go and do that. He's going to kill me. So I let him go. I might just cut his throat. That might be over with. But if he comes back, my blade will be here. You see that? Before I try to take this blade away, he's got an extra breathing hole like a whale, right? I'm going to cut the weapon out of his hand. And people say, well, disarms don't work. Yes, they do when you're disarming a corpse. But they don't often work if a person is still, right? So my initial attack or counter wants to be a serious blow. If he continues to combat after that, that's why I move and, I get to that level. I don't want to go here. Because that's an exchange. And there's a saying in the knife community, I'm sure you've heard it. In a knife fight, one person goes to the hospital, one goes to the morgue. Or one drips and one gushes. I don't believe that. I think that's bullshit. If that's true, I'm not going to do it. You don't hear gunfighters say, well, I'm going to get shot anyway, so I might as well just, no. They try not to get shot, right? So in a knife fight, my number one goal is my own survival. Number two goal, kill the man as quickly as possible. Because they don't really take into account, and most of the training you see in knife videos, you will not see this. You will not see an initial engagement. It's always, and they do it very fast. I'm aware of that, and their skill is quite high. Most of them are very, very skilled martial artists. But I don't want to train that way. That's kind of I told you when you asked me, I probably wouldn't have the same thing to say my peers do. But because I look at it differently. I'm not fighting a knife fighter. I'm fighting a man with a knife. Okay, is that kind of our system? Yes. We cut the hand. 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 The secondary part of the system is cut and answer. Cut. This goes through the arm and answer. Cut and answer. Cut and answer. Cut and answer. By the numbers, just like everybody else does. But we don't go because as soon as I go here, he's going to stop that. Now we're in this. We just exchange thrusts. I'm not going to exchange thrusts with you. I don't want to. So that's where we differ. Now, when I do this, and he comes back, then we will have that same, we call it hubad, which is this is a drill. That's part of training. We have that too. But it's how we get to it that's much different. Okay? We have the same drill, all this, what they call trapping and executing and disarming. We have that too. But we always qualify, how did I get here? The number one thing I get here, when he cuts me, I cut him. When his hand retracts, I follow him.
Right.
That's the key. When he cuts me, cut him. If I'm not sure, suppose he's faking, I don't do anything. Then I cut him. You see what I mean? I don't want to what?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to stand there and exchange. Most of the training being like this. And they're really fast and they're really good and they do this and then they go here and they go inside. But why are you going to do that? You'll be dead too. If he has a knife and you have a knife, you're both going to be dead. But I'm not going to do that.
Would you mind telling, are there certain principles that your system is built on? What is the most important thing that you concentrate on?
Yes, the main principle is of movement. So this is again where I kind of part ways with some of my peers. I believe that all knife fighting, the superior footwork, the man who's superior in moving his body will be the victor. And so the number one thing, the core principle is move, hit, block. In that order. So we don't really look to defend. We want to move. We want to counterattack or attack the opponent and block only or defend only when necessary. So we call it a move, hit, block. Okay, that is the goal, right? Sometimes that has to be both from the offensive and defensive standpoint. The second thing is we call it defang the snake. Everybody has that in their base structure. That means to take the weapon away from the opponent. That's another really core guiding principle. We want the opponent to really not be able to use his weapons. Sometimes that's by immobilization. Sometimes that's by disarming, and sometimes that's by, you could say, cut the head off the chicken. In other words, he's not alive anymore, he can't. Or when I say, number one, I want to cause motor dysfunction, so he cannot use the limb, or he cannot breathe. But the core principle will be based on movement. Because again, if my opponent attacks me, if I move out of the way, I just poked his eye out. So that would be number one. Number two is if I can defend the snake. That's number two. Number three is if that doesn't work, then we enter into what we call the close combat range. This right here is where most people start the fight. Okay, they start the knife fight here, and so that's really the third level for me. So number one, we utilize movement, and I have a saying: the only thing that protects your flesh against a knife is air. That means the space between you and the opponent, or if you're wearing armor. Okay, but every armor has gaps. So number one, our core principle is based on footwork or movement. And you see a lot of systems that utilize that. However, their counterattack is really lame. But you really, I want to say, it's movement, number one. Number two is put fire on the enemy, or put your weapon in their path. So if it's on the arm, or if it's on the airway, or the eyeball, or the groin, or the heart, something that's going to make them stop moving quickly. And then number three would be, when you're in close quarter, the ability to flow with the knife and translate that knife from high to low, low to high, or the skill in using the knife. That's way down the road, because if you do one and two correctly, there is no three. Whereas, like I say, a lot of people start at number three. So number one, move. Number two, strike the opponent. Number three, if necessary, do everything everybody else does.
Does it matter for you with what kind of knife you work with?
No, actually, a sharp one. Really, I would say it doesn't matter what shape your blade is if you can't touch me with it. Okay, and I will tell you this: I will use a stick, a sliver that's sharp, or a flashlight, or any knife. It doesn't matter to me how long it is, or as long as it's pointed and will do damage to my opponent. I don't need a preference, because I have to train to use what's available to me. It might be your knife, so whatever knife you like, that's what I will use. I'm not going to train specifically for, a lot of people get a boner about the karambit. I don't feel like that's any more effective or less effective than a K-bar, an old military bayonet, or just a knife you get out. As long as it's not going to break when you're using it, it's effective. But like I said, I will use a pointed stick and have the same effect as a person who has a bolo, because it's the tactics that make the difference, not the weapon. And the man holding the weapon is far more important than the type of blade you use.
Are there tactics and strategy in your system?
Yes, you could say that the tactics and strategy are based on two weapons. Okay. So now these are butterfly swords. You've probably seen them, but I'm using these just as an example. It could be really any two weapons, and that includes my two hands being two weapons. But it's based on the use of two weapons, and it's designed around that. So all of the strategy is I have to deal with the opponent as if he has two weapons. Okay, a lot of people say, well, I have a a knife system that's single knife, then I have a knife system that's double knife. No, it has to be one. It's based on two sharp pointed objects. Okay, and the overall strategy is to avoid contact and only allow contact when I choose. In other words, number one, I want to choose the time and place of contact. If there's going to be contact between us, I'm going to determine when that happens and where the placement is. Now, I can't really demonstrate this on my partner because he'll die, but I can give you the idea. But the main idea is any opponent has two weapons, always, okay? I'm going to put these over here. Secondly, so like I said, number one strategy is treat this man as if he has two weapons, so that my tactical approach is anytime he attacks is to make sure I take care of both weapons. So if I'm empty-handed and he has two weapons, whatever I use has to insult his body in a way that is going to cause damage quickly. So I don't want to do this and spend too much time in here without hitting him. So I really, like I said, movement is key. His next attack, he will get struck. But I can't do it like this, where I'm addressing his weapon. And you probably can't see this, but on the board I have a saying. It says, put yourself in a position where you do not have to address the weapon, which means I never put myself in a place when he swings, I have to do something about it. So strategically, I'm placing myself where when he attacks, I can answer it, I can strike him, I can meet or follow or scissor his blow, but I don't have to. So I choose the time and place of that contact. That is crucial if you're going to survive a knife fight without being cut yourself. And a lot of people say, well, you're going to get cut. I don't understand how you think that. In ancient times, people were getting severe wounds and living through them. I don't think there would be old knife fighters if that was the case. So for me, anytime I fight a man, I always treat it as if he has two weapons. And it could be two swords, and it could be a knife and a sword, or two knives. It doesn't matter, because I will adjust the distance. But if he attacks me here, I move here. When he attacks with that weapon, I can insult him. When he attacks with his other weapon, that's when this kind of stuff that you see people do, that takes place. So again, the number one principle is based on movement and position. Okay, I want to gain a position and I want to injure my opponent as quickly as possible, but I'm not doing this. I'm not crashing, I'm not charging, I'm not putting myself in harm's way. I'm going to make him move so I can hit him with his own body. So the overall strategy is put yourself in a position where when he attacks, you choose whether or not you have to deal with it. If you look at an art like fencing, the reason they have that on a runway, two men using swords, if they didn't limit the movement, they would be all over the place and you couldn't score the match. That's because instinctively you don't want to get stabbed, right? But the way people teach knife fighting is to always be aggressive and approach a person. I will only do that if I have no other choice. Especially if I see him drawing a weapon, I'll hit him first. But if he has his weapons out, I will not approach him. If I have my own weapon, I will make him reach for me so I can stab him. So I don't really focus on one thing. My primary thing, my strategy is to create his attack. Okay? And whether that's an offense or defense. And tactically speaking, I want to make contact with a vital target as quickly as possible so that the fight isn't prolonged. So I'm always trying to create, if you'll pardon the pun, an edge, so that now when I do make contact, he's suffering damage every time he moves, every time he swings his weapon. I'm creating a better opportunity for myself. I really don't want to never face off square to him because speed will kill me. And this too much of the training is done like this. You notice the minute he pulls his knives, I move to an angle. When he attacks with the other weapon, he's dead because he reached for me. But if I stand here and I cover that and I go like this, I'm actually behind him in movement, so I have to be better than him. Well, there's no way I can be better than everybody. I'm already 52 years old. So if I'm going to survive, I have to be more intelligent. So the number one thing is create the angles and position. Let your opponent make mistakes.
All right.
I'm not saying I'm passive or defensive, but even my attack, let's just say this. He has two weapons. Really, how can I attack him in a way that won't get me cut? If I attack here, he'll cut me. If I attack there, he'll cut me. If I attack here, and I've already trained him to know that. So what I do is I move. Okay? I move, and when I attack him, when he attacks me, I kill him. Does that make sense? I don't want to be here. I need to make sure that I draw his attack out. Now I can enter. Now I can cut him. Now I can deal with him.
Is the psychological preparation is important in knife training?
Absolutely. We call it mindset training or psychological training is it's equally as important, if not more important, than systemic training. In other words, if you have a good system and your mindset is poor, you're toast. And I think that falls right into the thing of strategy and tactics. If you don't have psychological training or mindset training, you don't have tactics or strategy. And so I have to get into my opponent's head as well as keep my own emotions under control. And the common mistake that everyone makes in knife fighting or any fighting for that matter is that psychological need to win fast. So in sparring, for instance, if we have two knives, everybody does this. If we're going to spar, we're going to go back and forth here until someone wins. That's a psychological error. What on earth tells me that when he swings, I have to engage him? What on earth gives me the inclination that if he moves back, then I have to move back and let him back into that space? That's all part of the psychological training. Absolutely. It's the biggest mistake in martial arts of all kinds, is that there's no mindset or psychological training. And there are arts that focus on that and then they forget everything else. So yes, it's at least 70% of the game. But the skill, the weapon handling skill has to be there too. But a guy with mindset and no training will stab a guy with a lot of training and no mindset, no understanding.
What do you think pushes one to start working with a knife, to start training with a knife?
I think it probably would have to do with your environment. A lot of people feel like it's not important. Possibly they don't have a reason to environmentally. In other words, for me, I know in my area where my school is, you need to have that in your repertoire. I mean, everybody has a knife. So if you don't have one, you're in trouble. So from the standpoint of that, people are going to want to do it for their survival skill. Number two would be people enjoy it. They think it's sexy. They think, they have a caramba or they have a bolo or a barong, and they like to use the blade, and they like the feel in the hand. So it's you could say it's a hobby for some. And I think number one probably might be the hobby part, but I think a number of people, at least my students, they come to train because they need it for their own safety. they feel like they have to have it. And that's why I teach it. I don't teach it as a recreational art. And so that's why my opinion of it is different. I've been cut, so when you walk down the street and you see 7 out of 10 people are carrying knives that you see, and then probably other 3 have them you don't see, then you're probably going to look for some training. And then, a lot of places, people do it for their they think it's sexy, it's the new fad, Psyoc or Paquita, whatever knife system. Knife systems are sexy to people. But I think it's not sexy. I think it's ugly and grotesque. But it's necessary.
Next question is, nowadays there are quite a lot of situations when a person trains so many years in a sport hall. However, when they are faced with a certain situation in the street, they run away. Why is it so?
Probably because they have no real world confidence in their skill. Possibly, they really never had to have that engagement. Your natural fear will take over. Personally, if I can get away, I will, because there's consequence to me killing you. If I kill you, I've got to deal with the law enforcement. So that's possibly part of it. For me, if I can get away from a situation, I'm going to do that. If it dictates, otherwise it's not going to last long. So possibly, people who train in sports, they don't have the proper tactics, and they possibly are not trained to fight more than one person. And so in a situation when there's a high threat, they choose to get away if they can. For me, also, in any situation that's high threat, my mind is going to go tactically. Where's the exit? Can I exit? Do I need to engage? If I need to engage, what are weapons available if I'm not able to carry? Because in a lot of places, you won't be able to carry a knife and or you won't be able to carry a weapon. I carry a 45, right? So that's my option to use. But if I pull a gun and start shooting it and the bullets don't hit the right target, I'm responsible for where those bullets go. And so a knife is a little bit more, you have control over it unless I throw it, right? But a lot of people who do sports probably don't have real world experience. They've never been in a fight outside of the ring. And so they don't understand how to handle it. They could let the fear control them instead of using the fear to help them. The reason a lot of time people with much training fail in life and death situations, as opposed to running away, they try to fight and they fail, is because they don't psychologically process that. They don't give themselves permission to injure the other person. So if I'm going to succeed in a life and death struggle or close combat, the first thing I have to do is give myself permission to injure another human being. And a lot of people, they have a moral barrier. They don't want to hurt somebody, so they will lose.
John, would you mind please telling us, if I understand you correctly, you actually can prepare one psychologically so that he or she can win basically in any situation?
That's all I do. That's what I do. That's my job every day. I'm preparing my students for that from the first day of class all the way to the last. I have students that train with me 20 years, and I have students that train with me 1 year. That's our goal. So that in any situation, regardless of the weapons they have or don't have, is to prevail. Okay? To eliminate the opponents, no matter how many. If there are 10 or 100, we're going to take them out. But we're going to do it in a way that we don't get injured. I'm not a kamikaze pilot. I'm not going to crash my plane into the ship. I'm going to systematically take out every person regardless of how many guns, knives, swords, sticks. If I have nothing or if I have a weapon, really it doesn't matter to me. As soon as I'm in the situation, I already start to tactically assess who needs to go first, when, where, and why, and where I need to be, and how I need to move and position myself in order to keep the opponents from gaining an advantage. So yeah, I believe I can do that. 100%, I believe I can do that. And I don't believe in the 10% rule that my peers have that, you've heard this, I'm sure. In a knife fight, 10% of the time you're not going to get cut. That's bullshit. In a knife fight, 10% of the time you might cut me. If I get cut, I'll accept it. I'm going to kill you anyway, but I'll accept it. But I don't accept I'm going to get cut 90% of the time. No. Maybe 10%. So, if you asked me this 10 years ago, I would have had a different answer. But I've worked and worked and worked and worked for 32 years to come up with that solution. Yes, I can get you out of any situation. You, her, a 6-year-old kid, an 80-year-old man, a 70-year-old woman, yes, absolutely.
Скажите, пожалуйста,
What is the difference of your knife system among all other ones?
в разных других систем ножевого боя.
I would say the difference is how we approach the training. Number one is I don't indoctrinate my students into my system and tell them how they have to attack, how they have to defend. I let them at first show me what they do. If they attack, for instance, in a way that's awkward and clumsy, that's good for me to learn how to deal with a person who's awkward and clumsy. A lot of times a person who's attacking you might not be skilled. So you need to be able to deal with that person as well as the person who is a ninja or whatever. Okay, and so my system from the ground up is based on simplicity. It's based on if I ask myself, can a 16-year-old girl do this and get away with it against a 240-pound man? Can a 105-pound woman defeat a 240-pound man with this? If it doesn't work for her, I don't teach it. And let me give you a little background. I studied Muay Thai for many, many years under a Thai master. I studied Jeet Kune Do under the Jeet Kune Do instructor, the premier one. I studied Wing Chun under 2 different instructors, and I studied Filipino martial arts. And I will say that all of them have merit, and all of them have bad habits that get created by training mostly to fight your own system. And what that means is most knife fighters will train that if a person slashes angle number 1, that the second attack will be angle number 6, followed by an angle number 4, and then a 5 thrust with an uppercut. Nobody that's trying to kill you will do that. So the difference between my knife system and everybody else's is we don't indoctrinate our students to feed a certain way. We don't indoctrinate them to attack. So we train how to deal with what is real from day one. Do I teach some weapon handling skill? Absolutely. But I don't put that before understanding how to deal with violence. Because ultimately a martial arts is inflicting violence and dealing with violence. It is not a system. The system is a process of learning. And you have to get rid of the system if you really want to function outside of your own individual school. And I believe that my peers in Wing Chun and my peers in Filipino martial arts really don't like me because I say that. But I believe that's the biggest problem that some of them have when it comes to applying their art is they apply it mostly against their own students or against their own peers. And therefore they don't understand what can really happen. How's that guy going to attack you? Not like Balintawak, not like Paquita. They don't know that. Mm-hmm. In fact, your average criminal room in the street that's going to stab you is not going to walk up in front of you and go, ha ha, how about you, right? he's going to come up behind you. He's going to come up from the side. He's going to wait till you're not paying attention. So that's number one. My knife system deals with that stuff primarily, and the systemology is down here. The systemology is the shallow water. You can have that all you want and still can't fight. But if you have the understanding and the mindset and the basic tactical knowledge, you can survive against a much superior fighter. And Joe will tell you this all the time. I say this: you have to be able to beat a man that's more skilled than you. Far more skilled, stronger, faster, better, more talented. You have to be able to defeat that guy. Otherwise, it's not a martial art. It's a lot of horseshit. It's just a system. It's like playing chess. You want to play chess? I'll punch you. Then I win.
Скажите, пожалуйста,
John, there is an emblem on your t-shirt and on the wall. Can you please share what does it mean?
вашей системы. Могли бы вы рассказать, что она означает?
Yes. Well, the yin yang with the arrows. That's the Jeet Kune Do symbol. That's from the Bruce Lee martial art, and people know Bruce Lee's martial arts as Jun Fan or Jeet Kune Do. But that is a weapons-based art. A lot of people think about it as kickboxing. That's not JKD. That is Wing Chun. So Jeet Kune Do being a weapons-based art, we use that. The second one is the Filipino martial arts, which is again, it's a weapons-based art, and so the triangle represents a lot of different things. There's 3 different triangles. Then, of course, the sword and the shield cross, the empty hand, and the moon. The moon represents that the art is secret. It's only practiced in moonlight or in darkness, and that's traditional. And then the first triangle, at the top is love, honor, and humility. And then what we talk about is understanding. The triangle, all of the footwork and all the movement is based on the triangle. So anytime I'm moving, I really don't move in a straight line. I'm really always moving from one angle to another. Makes it more difficult for my opponent to contact me because my tip is here. And when you attack me, that's where my blade is. If I move to the left or to the right, my body is out of the way of your blade. So that's basically, it tells you that we do Jeet Kune Do, we do Wing Chun, and we do Filipino martial arts. That's our base structure. And then we also do Silat, which is, we don't really see a difference between any of the arts because all of those arts are based on weaponry. Wing Chun being based on a spear and a sword. Jeet Kune Do being based on a long weapon, you could say a fencing saber or whatever. And Filipino martial arts is the universal understanding of weaponry from handheld blunt weapons to sharp objects to improvised weapons, all the way from, what do we say, double sword, all the way down to double dagger, empty hand, and what they call spiritual, or we call mindset training. That's all part of the art. That's why we have the many different symbols. Tries to give you the understanding. It is a universal martial art. It's not a style or a system. However, styles and systems are used in your education. It's like learning your ABCs. You need those symbols. But once you do that, you don't go around saying your ABCs. That's systemology. We don't have that indoctrination. But we utilize that to grow from.
Does your system has a certain relation to knight traditions?
Yeah, in a sense it does. But you have to think of it more in terms of the Shaolin monks. Okay, that's sort of a warrior tradition. That's where the art originated. If you look at, Silat or Wing Chun or Chinese martial arts, you could say it originated from those traditions, which, if you look back in history, they were all using spears and swords and weaponry, and the empty hands were trickles of that. If you look at the samurai tradition, all of the Japanese martial arts, they all came from when you lost your sword in combat. If you look at the Filipino martial arts, they all had a warrior tradition. It was a little bit less formal, but it still carried that same tradition of a warrior and the warrior spirit. I could really relate to the Templars being Anglo, but the arts that I study are Asian, Southeast Asian. And Silat, the Indonesian Silat, which is known from Indonesia, actually came from Macedonia. So it has the tradition of that embedded in it, although most people who teach it don't even know that. But it actually came from the nephew of Alexander the Great. His bodyguards founded Silat, or they call it Salak or Sarak. It's many names that are, over time, the name changes. And of course, in the Philippines, there's a very proud warrior tradition going back centuries, far longer than my country's been in existence. And it's said that there were Filipino martial arts in the United States in 1509. In the 1500s, there were people teaching bladed arts in this country, in the United States, before the United States was even a nation. But yeah, there's a tradition, and a warrior, spirit behind that, and it's mostly not brought out. It's not profitable, in this day and age to express that. But yeah, you could say, because I teach many arts, there are many traditions that are behind them. But typically, like I say, in the triangle, we have love at the top, honor and humility. The love is that we train in martial arts because we love our culture, our family, our history. We love our nation, and we are warriors to protect that. And then honor is that we honor that tradition, our culture, our community, our family, our tribe, or whatever. And then humility is we never think that we're better than our opponent. We never put ourselves ahead of our family, our country, our culture, or history. So we're just a part of that. And a true warrior, yes, he believes that he can defeat anyone in combat, but he doesn't really walk around showing that openly. He might be the quietest man in the room, and you won't know he's a warrior until shit starts.
Скажите, пожалуйста, почему...
How do you think, why are there so many people nowadays that are willing to teach knife fighting?
преподавать ножевой бой?
Well, that started, I would think, in the mid to late 1990s. Prior to that, we never really allowed knife tactics to get out of what we call the inner circle, but came from the woodwork. These knife experts, many of them from the Philippines, and they started teaching it to anybody who would write them a check, and they began certifying instructors immediately. So you could become a knife instructor in a certain system, which I won't mention, from one seminar. You could go to one 8-hour course and become a master in knife fighting. And therefore, they established these large organizations that grew very rapidly, especially in the United States first, then all throughout Europe. They're all over. And they teach these knife systems that are on the face, when you look at it, they're very sophisticated. And they look really cool. When you have two guys doing what they do, they can be made to look superior. But in fact, they don't know jack shit. The only reason they can do it is they know what the opponent's already going to do before he does it. And so it proliferated in the 90s, and then throughout when the year 2000 came around, there were already hundreds of people, instructors, maybe with 1 year training, and it grew and grew. And then my own instructors, who prior to that would never teach us offensive knife fighting. The only thing they taught us in the 80s was defensive knife tactics. The only people they taught offensive knife tactics to were the Navy SEALs and the Delta Force and the special operators. But after it started to come out, they had to teach everybody because it's out. It's like, once it's out there, you have to protect your student and teach it to them. And so that's kind of how it got started. And then it kind of became a sexy thing. Everybody on YouTube and Facebook has a knife video, and they're an expert at knife fighting. And I will probably tell you 99% of them, if you pull a knife on them, they're going to shit their pants and run away because they really don't believe in it. And if they do, they're fools because they believe in a lie. But a lot of it, like I said, is based on indoctrination into the system first. Once you indoctrinate in the student how to be a knife fighter, then you teach them how good you are to defeat what you already taught them. So it's kind of like a pyramid scheme, and that's how it got started. Now it's proliferated, and everybody has a very, very sophisticated knife system, which I don't believe. Well, let me put it in the words of my instructor. He said this about one knife system. I'm not going to say its name, but he said it's the most sophisticated knife system I've ever seen. And he said, but your knife system should be simple if you expect it to work. And I firmly believe that. In fact, I know it's true. And so the knife, like I said, is sexy. I mean, guys, going at it with 2 knives and all the spinning the guy around and cutting and, stabbing them in the arteries. Yeah, it looks cool and people enjoy it. They think it's superior, when in fact, it's really remedial in my opinion. So I said I can drive a car 200 miles an hour, but there's traffic everywhere. You're going to get killed. So like this, Joe, can I borrow you now? So this is very typical of a knife system. Joe's going to stab me. I got a real one. Okay, so he's going to stab me here, like this. Yeah, not like this. Make sure it's like this. And the guy goes like this, right? And then he goes over here, and he goes like that, and then he thrusts. Then maybe he scoops it like that, and he catches the hand, he does a disarm. And then I stab him, and he does that, and I cut and counter him. All kind of stuff like that. It looks really cool. And then we're like this, and he stabs me, and I cut him, and I scoop the knife, and I stab him. He stops me, I stab him. All this kind of thing looks really cool. So people enjoy it, and they find it very fascinating. And so it's really, really become a big business. But in reality, what they're learning is what I would call the third motion techniques, not the first motion techniques. So it's really sexy, and it's cool. And so it's everywhere now. But I would say 90% of the people teaching you never cut anybody, never been cut, and therefore might not have the best idea about how to go about doing it.
Are there any criteria according to which you can tell whether a person is a real master or not?
Yeah, I would say the first thing, the most difficult part is, when you see what they're doing, and just deciding why are they doing it. So it's easy for me to look with 32 years of training to see and say, well, that guy, is a systemologist. He knows the system, but he's no idea what he's doing or why he's doing it. And you can look at this guy and say, well, he has experience and his skill might be basic, but his understanding is high. I would consider somebody with average skill, but understanding to be far more a master than someone with high skill and little understanding. So you'd have to look at the simplicity of what they do. If it's a knife or sword fighting art, the technique or tactic must be simple. For instance, can I bring Joe in and show you? Do you mind if I? If Joe is here and he's threatening me with a knife, if I do this, I'm a beginner. I might look good from there. Whatever I do might be really cool and fancy. But if I'm here and he's there, you already got to run from that guy. You don't want to train with him. When he presents the knife to me, if the guy moves at an angle, and that's how he starts the training, then you can say he probably has some experience. And then based on what he does after that, you could say whether he's a skilled and knowledgeable instructor or whether he is full of shit. And that's the part. Also, you can see when the knife is thrust. If the person makes a movement that is large against a movement that is small, he probably isn't very, he's not a master. Because a movement that is small must be answered by a movement that is small. Okay, you can't, in other words, I can't expect him to slash me and expect him to wait for my knife to go all the way around here and then all the way back before he does something. So when you see guys that do a lot of this kind of stuff, then you have to go, why are they doing that? Just ask yourself, why are they doing that? Because my job is to stab you and make you bleed and then lie down. My job isn't to move your knife around. Because when I'm doing this, what is he doing? So if he scoops my arm, okay, when he does that, I automatically go, don't touch my knife. I will pull my knife away and then cut his face. I'm not going to go 1001, 1002, 1003. Oh, you see, so you could identify really quickly if there's a lot of motion, a lot of blending of hands and motion like that. The person has skill, but I wouldn't train with them. I would try to get away from them as fast as possible. If the person presents a weapon and the person moves, I would say, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. And there's a few out there that I've seen their stuff and I say, wow, this guy's good. And there's a lot of them out there that I tell them to their face, this is why most of them hate me. You're very, very skilled, but I have no idea why you're doing that in a knife fight. Why on earth? Why am I going like this? It takes too long. He's not going to let you do that. But see, that is why I say they're indoctrinated, because he's taught, as the person stabbing me, when he goes like that, he's supposed to go all the way around and then thrust me on this side. So when he does that, see, my technique now is valid. That's the first thing most knife fighters will teach you. When they do that, get the hell out of the school right then. As soon as they show you that, run away. If they show you this, stay there. And he might be able to teach you how to survive a knife fight. But if he teaches you this and then this, just get the hell out of there right now. Because you're going to get killed if you do that shit. So I would say the easiest way to tell is how sophisticated the art is, how many motions, like this. Again, let me say this one time. If he thrusts, and my technique is, you stand there now. And then if my technique is that while he thrusts, you got to ask yourself why. Because the minute I hit his hand, he's going to pull it back. And then he's going to stab me again. He's not going to stand there while I go and do all that shit. He's not going to do it. When he stabs me, I hit him and I hit his face. And I get away from his knife and I kill him when he approaches me. I'm going to make him kill himself. I'm not going to go there and do this shit. So definitely you got to watch out for that. But everybody's a professional nowadays. Professional is determined really by how much money they make, not what they're teaching you.
Джон, и
And the
последний
last
вопрос.
question,
Пожалуйста,
John, is there a
как
future
вы
for a knife in 21st century?
будущее у ножа в 21 веке?
No, I think 100% it's going to be more valid and more important in the future than it has been in the past. Right now, there's a lot of firearms. There's a lot of, but I think that's going to have more restriction and more control. And so a knife, I think educates your body. And really, everything I do with a knife, I do with a firearm too. So how I draw my knife, how I use my knife, all the tactics of that apply to all weaponry, all fighting, all combat. But no, I believe that you're going to run out of bullets. So you're going to need a knife and an axe and whatever you can pick up and put in your hand. So knife training it has to remain. And you should, again, be seeking, and I'm not beating my own drum, okay? But you should seek a knife system that you can make functional as quickly as possible. So today, if you come in and train with me, I will ask, not what you can do a year from now, but what can you do today? And I can teach you in one day to survive against someone with 10 years training. So I would say, no, it's always going to be relevant, and I think in the future, it'll be more relevant than it has been in the past, especially, all of the attempts to exercise control of firearms. You're going to need that training. And I might not have a knife on me, but if you've got one, I'm going to get yours. So, yeah, knife training is going to be relevant even when we're living on the moon.